And we're joined by the Mayor of Toronto, His Worship, John Tory. Good morning, sir.
Hello, John.
Are you going to have to raise taxes?
Well, the answer is yes, but the misleading part of the coverage of the story to do with SmartTrack has been that I will have to raise property taxes to pay for SmartTrack. And I said SmartTrack would not result in a rise in property taxes, but it says, and I have the report right in front of me on my desk, it says property tax increases or equivalent sources of annual revenue. And you know I've been very clear in saying there will be 1 month from now a debate on a very specific report that comes out and puts forward a series of measures from which we'll have to choose in order to pay for transit and housing, because they're not free. But we will not have to raise property taxes to do this.
Okay, so what's the hard figure of the missing money?
Well, I mean, I guess if you added everything up, I mean, John, you've got to go all the way down the list and include something, for example, that's not even in this report, like the relief line that we talk about so much. And so if we want to pay for the relief line, we want to pay for the LRTs that are discussed in this report and SmartTrack, we are talking about our share being in the billions of dollars. Now, that's spread over a long period of time, and that means our contribution to all these transit projects to the total cost, again, people should focus on this, and it's right in the report, I'm not making the number up, is about 15%. So city taxpayers will pay for about 15%, and I think that kind of number is quite fair. I think in the past it's been the case often that we've been asked to pay much more, and I'm working hard and have been quite successful at getting money from the other governments to help us pay for our transit projects, and I give them full marks for giving it. But there are going to have to be, what we've done in the past, John, what we've done in the past is we have announced these projects and put them on the books and said they're going to be done, and then never confronted the question of how they're going to be paid for. And I have said I won't operate that way, and that's why we're having the debate in a month and why we will have some revenue measures to raise the money to pay for the transit that we must build.
Okay, but I'm still looking like if it's not going to be 2% property tax hike, which is not substantial but significant, are there enough other artisanal taxes where you're going to be able to actually, and who's going to pay them, where you're going to raise that money?
Well, I mean, look, all of these taxes in the end are all paid by the same people. I mean, there's a difference in terms of the burden that it places on some people as opposed to others when you choose something other than property taxes. But the bottom line is, yes, there are lots of these so-called revenue measures that will be discussed in this report that can produce quite a bit of money. I'm not minimizing what 2% of property taxes is to people who pay them out there, but at the end of the day, John, it's about $60 million per year. So, we're not talking about something that that is an amount of money that can't possibly be raised any other way.
We're talking with Toronto Mayor John Tory, and a report came out yesterday with all sorts of detail about planned transit for the city of Toronto, who's going to pay for it and where the money's going to come from. I realize he's trying to poke you in the eye, John Tory, but Councillor Gord Perks called this document a failure for John Tory and said, especially of SmartTrack, we're not getting 22 stations, we're not getting it in 7 years. He's a big critic of SmartTrack. Are you still committed to SmartTrack?
Totally. I mean, what it's going to provide for is a train that runs on tracks that are already largely there. They're doubling up some of the tracks in places like Scarborough, and the construction, by the way, is underway as we speak. But it's going to provide for the ability to use the GO train tracks to ride inside the city. And that's not really ever been possible before to any great extent. So it'll mean one more way in which people inside the city can take train tracks that were largely devoted to moving people in and out of the city from the outlying areas and allow them to use those to commute. And so I'm totally committed to it. And in fact, if you add up all the stations that will exist between the West LRT and the heavy rail part that goes from Mount Dennis over to Markham, it's more than 22 stations, I think. Look, I'm a big boy. I've been in politics for a few years now, and when your critics criticize you, they do that because that's part of what they do, and in terms of what their job they feel is. The response of Gord Perks and Janet Davis yesterday was to say we need more study. I will just tell you, I think the reason we're in the mess we're in terms of traffic in the city is because of more study. Let's redecide. Let's decide over again. And I'm getting on with this, and we're being truthful about it. We're being honest about how it has to be paid for, and I think that's what people expect is action with the explanations as to how we're going to get it done.
Okay, and this next question may be where people's eyes start to glaze over, but there seems to be considerable dispute over what other levels of government are going to pay, where you're going to get the money.
Well, in this case, we've had very substantial commitments made by Prime Minister Trudeau, and he's been honoring those thus far, and I think we're going to have more details of those commitments today from the federal government, so I'm optimistic. They're going to pay a bigger chunk than ever before. The province has already announced a huge investment of multi-billion dollars in these different projects, and so then, as I say, we're going to contribute our 15%. But I think that 15% number sounds quite fair in all of the circumstances, given that it's transit that's going to benefit our people here in Toronto, and so we're going to just move ahead and get it done. I think, again, people are tired of seeing the governments fight about who's going to pay. In this case, all three governments will be into these projects substantially, and we're going to move ahead and get them done, which I think is really what people want us to do.
And you're going to be meeting with the Premier today. Is anything coming out of that?
Well, I mean, we're just going to absolutely be, kind of confirming our mutual commitment to get the transit built. But I'm also going to be talking to her about some of these other measures that we've discussed before, such as the hotel tax, largely paid for by visitors to Toronto, which will be all part of the mix in terms of our financial situation, including paying for transit.
John Tory, thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
John Tory.